energy fill the skies.
Good morning and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago right here on Tobago Updates. Guys, as promised, we continue with much more discussions here. And this morning I have the privilege of chatting with Assemblyman Kelvon Morris, who's also the representative for Darrell Spring Wim. Now, this morning we are talking about a number of topics, but we start off with that landmark judgment against the T.H.A that we saw coming out yesterday as it regards to the unlawful dismissal of 13 employees. Have you been paying attention?
Certainly. Let me firstly say good morning to you, Ms. Felix, and good morning to all of Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago, and all our loyal listeners on this very informative program.
Right. And as it pertains to that judgment, I'm guessing obviously you would have seen that come out. Yes. Are you aware of the case, the situation of those 13 persons being dismissed? So it was said that these persons would have been employed since 2009 and were dismissed, I believe, in 2022. What are your views on this judgment?
Well, as per the judgment, this was a clear-cut case of political victimization. It was unfair, unjust, and very heartless, ultimately, because I've always maintained that we are Tobagonians first, aside from all things. And therefore, notwithstanding administrations may change, we must first treat Tobagonians, as people. And there is a right way and a wrong way to do things. And therefore, the court found that the approach was clearly one of political vindictiveness and wickedness. And this must not be tolerated in this Tobago space as we go forward. I also understand that there are multiple matters of this nature still pending awaiting judgment. And, you know, for me this morning, I'm quite disappointed in our Chief Secretary, the Honorable Fali Chavez Augustine, because here it is. The court has found your administration acting illegally, unlawfully is the word they use. And rather than humble yourself, accept the judgment and deal with the people in a decent manner, ensuring that they, after 3.5 years, they receive some kind of compensation. You are now going to waste precious Tobago taxpayers' money to go and put in some lawyer's hand to appeal a matter where there seems to be little to no likelihood of that matter being overturned, because at least we in Tobago, we deserve, if you are going to appeal the matter, well, bring to bear what is the grounds you are going to appeal this matter on. And I think every right-thinking Tobagonian should call on this Chief Secretary to accept the judgment and let us move on. And let us move on in a manner that contract workers will feel a sense of security that while yesterday it was the community partnership unit, tomorrow it will not be my unit. Because the fact is, contract workers now are working in a sense of fear, because it may also be, we have another election in a couple months, and they may be wondering if the other administration, if administrations change, if that would be their portion. The president. And I am happy this judgment has come, so it goes across the board, spanning administrations, that you would understand that regardless of the political changes, the persons who are employed in the T.H.A must be treated with dignity and with respect.
Right, and even in a situation where there were plans to restructure that unit, what would you have recommended the approach be as it pertains to, you know, trying to possibly change how things were done? Because there is the statement that there was little to nothing to show for the work that had been done from 2009 to 2022. When asked to produce reports on the work that was done within that unit, it was difficult for any evidence to be produced that actual work was being done there.
So, two things first and foremost. I've said to my colleagues that this policy, this must not become a revolving door where when governments change, some are exchanged in and some are exchanged out. So this policy of simply terminating persons based on political or on perceived political affiliation must stop. And we must also correct that kind of misinformation that was spread as justification for terminating hard-working, diligent Tobagonians. As far as I understand, there were 2 meetings. The first meeting, when the reports were provided, I understood the chief administrator then commended the CPU for their work, and the follow-up meeting caught the workers by surprise because they were of the opinion that the reports as presented satisfied the chief administrator's view of what they were doing. So, and of course, I'm sure arguments of such nature were made in the court, and of course, the judgment also found no justification to those claims. So, while it is easy to spread propaganda and misinformation, the facts did not bear that out. So I want to deal with that categorically. And even if there's an efficiency issue, there are ways within the system to improve efficiency and to also manage people through performance appraisals. And if we have a proper performance management appraisal system, then that will take care of those who are not doing that which they are being paid for. Because we can't be hypocritical. We cannot be in one breath saying we are terminating employees in one breath, but you are on a recording saying that you are willing to hire people to do things that which are not for the public interest, but for your political interest. So in one breath, you're saying you're firing people because they're not doing anything, but you were caught recorded basically trying to create a situation where you can use the very same T.H.A. to hire people for your personal propaganda. So that they cannot be hypocritical on that matter. I also want to say a second thing. When you have situations like this, first and foremost, we must ask, what is the role of the HR? Because it should not be politicians getting in the way of these decisions. It should come from empirical data, what the HR is saying. How are we going to, because there are many different ways to treat with, you could have redeployed employees if they are so willing to be redeployed. If you had to terminate, there's a process to terminate, but the court found that you simply just terminated, right? Yeah.
Without any compensation.
Without any and that is the other part, that you are sending home persons who are working, gave service to the T.H.A. for umpteen years, over a decade of service, and you didn't even have the heart to say, let me at least provide them with some form of compensation.
Yeah, compensation package.
Correct.
But for you, this hit home because your wife was one of those employees that was affected by this. And how has that been, seeing it firsthand, and how do you think that has affected many of the families that would?
I try to separate my public duty from my private duty, and therefore, while of course my wife was one of the persons who unfortunately was terminated when this unit was disbanded, I see the bigger picture of simply Tobagonians, who are properly qualified in various fields, at the CPEP level, at TATCO, at CPU, at monitoring evaluation. I understand, just as a human being, how mentally distressing this can be, where you are earning an income today, and the next day you do not even know where the next penny is going to come from. How are you going to feed your children? How are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to pay rent? And therefore, it is from that perspective, I, as a Tobagonian, really felt it for those workers, and I'm happy the court supports the view of many Tobagonians that this act by Farley Chavez Augustine and his rest of his friends were unlawful, unfair, and politically wicked.
Do you think the connection to you would have driven that decision to disband or dismantle that unit?
Well, it is a bigger connection. It is a connection to political vindictiveness, where an incoming government has taken the position that all persons who were hired during the tenure of the PNM are for some reason PNM, not recognizing that they were voted in overwhelmingly. So it meant that even perhaps people who supported the PNM in the past would have had to support them this time around. And you know what is hurtful? The Chief Secretary gave his word to those workers. He said on multiple occasions that you contract workers, you have absolutely nothing to fear. We will not terminate your jobs. That is a man giving his word. And what the Chief Secretary has proven is that on this occasion, as with many things, he is not a man of his word, and he's not a man to be trusted.
Understood. Now we're going to take a quick break right here, and we'll be back as we continue with much more discussion. See you soon.
Sure.